Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the big time players from week 0, gave out some of the players of the week, but now it's time to turn the page. We are moving on to week 1 here, and not that week 0 wasn't incredible, absolutely loved it, but week 1 is going to be that much more incredible. It's going to be awesome to watch all of these games unfold, and there are still some big time questions around these big time teams that are going to be playing on Saturday that they're going to have to figure out either on Saturday or before Saturday if they're going to be able to win those. So let's get into this. And my biggest question for Georgia, at least, is do they have a running back issue in week 1? And I don't think they're going to have a running back issue for the whole year, but there's a reality where week 1 gets just a little bit sketchy. Roderick Robinson, a very talented guy that had gotten rave reviews throughout the offseason, has been down with a turf toe injury, and that one's a very, very hard one to figure out when he's going to be back from. There's a reality where he does not play on Saturday. Branson Robinson is just getting back from about a 9-month-long injury that he is still recovering from, and Trevor Etienne's status for week 1 is still a little bit up in the air. With an arrest he had earlier in the offseason, there is a suspension that could be in play at Georgia. Not really sure what the story is there, but definitely something that could be on the table. And if all of those things happen, let's say Branson Robinson or both Robinsons in general just aren't 100%, and Etienne is sidelined for game 1, what are the alternatives? How can they move forward? And one of the bigger ones is Cash Jones, a very talented former walk-on that has gotten work here or there. You know, he very much understands this offense, has done a number of really good things in his past, and definitely is going to be a big-time player for them. But the guy that I'm really watching is the guy on your screen right there. Nate Frazier is a freshman and a very, very interesting name to watch. A super talented guy that might just be thrust into action in week 1 with all of the different questions around that position. But at the end of the day, this is a very talented guy, someone that they absolutely love, and has gotten some very, very intense comps like Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb during his time at in Athens. But at the end of the day, a very talented kid, and maybe, just maybe, you have to ask a little bit more of him in week 1. Now, I think they're going to be more than fine in running back going forward, and I don't necessarily know if it's going to be a problem for week 1, but there's a reality where Roderick Robinson is still suffering from turf toe and can't get out there. There is a reality where Branson Robinson is not near 100% after coming back from that injury, and there is a reality where Trevor Etienne is suspended for that first game, and if all three of those things happen, then you're in a little bit of a precarious situation against a defensive line for Clemson that is going to be really good against the run. So that'll be very interesting to watch throughout this week, and we'll obviously know by Saturday what this situation is. But as of right now, it looks just a little bit up in the air at the running back position for Georgia. Moving on, who is Notre Dame's starting 5 on the offensive line? Because that's been a really, really hard thing to figure out throughout fall camp, and it happened in a lot of ways because Charles Jagusa went down with a big-time injury. That was going to be their starter at left tackle, and it caused a lot of shuffling, a lot of confusion around that offensive line, and on Saturday, they got to play a really good defensive line. Texas A&M has Nick Scourton and Cassius Howell coming off the edge. They have Shamar Turner and Albert Regis in the middle, and they're going to be able to push you around if you do not have that offensive line set the way that you want it to. So it looks like this offensive line is the most questionable part of this team. In fact, the group over at Blue and Gold, the On3 Notre Dame page, Tyler Horka kind of went around and asked the team, what is the weakest unit of this team? And it was offensive line, without question. And it's in a lot of ways because of that injury. Frankly, I don't know if they would be number 9 on this team in position groups if it wasn't because of that injury. And Riley Leonard's a really good player. If that O-line doesn't come together, it doesn't necessarily matter how good of a player he's going to be this upcoming year. As of right now, the way it looks like it's shaking out is they're going to have freshman Anthony Knapp at left tackle. They're going to have sophomore Sam Pendleton at left guard. Ashton Craig, a junior at center. They're going to have another junior, Billy Schrouth, at right guard, and then Emil Wagner, the one guy that has been the constant throughout this, at right tackle, another junior. So that right side looks a little bit more experienced. That left side is dangerous. You have a freshman and a sophomore, both of which have not played big-time snaps, and I don't think either have gotten a start during their career. I know that the freshman obviously hasn't, but I don't think Sam Pendleton has either. So they're going to have to figure that out. If they can totally attack one side of this offensive line, if they can just put Nick Scourton on Anthony Knapp over and over and over again, it's going to be a nightmare day for him, plain and simple. So it's going to be really, really interesting to watch this, and they got to figure this out before Saturday. And if they don't, then they could be in for a long day, and it could be off to a very, very rough start in 2024 for Notre Dame. Moving forward to that game in Gainesville, Who needs it more? We talked about this a little bit ago. My answer was Florida, and I think I stick by that. But man, you could really argue me into Miami because Miami's walking into this year with so much talent, so much hype, so much hope going into this year, and they got to make some noise. And if they fall on their face in week one and they lose in Gainesville, there's going to be a lot of people yelling from the mountaintops that this team is overrated, that they don't belong, that they're not going to be a team that's going to have to be worried about. That's the same old Miami. I promise you'll hear that plenty. But at the end of the day, it would be really bad if this team lost that week one game and brought all this momentum, all this hype to a screeching halt, and then you got to figure out how you go from there. Exactly like what Florida State is dealing with right now. So it'll be interesting to watch it. But on the Florida side, they face one of the hardest schedules coming forward that I've seen in quite some time. It's an absolute nightmare, and that those last 5 weeks of the season we've talked about pretty much ad nauseum, so I won't get into it, but they're a nightmare, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, both teams are going to be ridiculed. Both teams will be questioned. Both programs will have a ton of questions to answer if they were to lose this game. At the end of the day, I think the Gators needed just a little bit more. I think when you look at that schedule, when you look at what's in front of them, and when you look at the perception around Billy Napier, they badly need this one. And I think Miami would be hurt, no doubt about it, like Florida State, but could turn it around and still win the ACC even with this loss. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. I'd lean the Gators needed just a little bit more, but this is one of those that is an absolute battle, and it's going to be very interesting to watch throughout this one. But the other question I have is, who's walking into a trap in week one? We saw in week 0 that it was off the walls crazy, and Georgia Tech was able to pull off that big-time game. There's another one in week one. I can almost promise you that. There's going to be something that goes crazy this upcoming weekend, and Penn State at Morgantown could be the number one. When you look at the environment that they're going into, when you look at the team that they're going to play against, a very veteran team with a good coach that has a lot in place, kind of like that Florida State game. It could get a little bit sketchy for this team if they walk in just a little bit off kilter for Penn State. So you have a feeling that another top 10 team could be going down this upcoming week, and actually we'll get into that tomorrow. We'll break down just how chaotic it could be in week one. But at the end of the day, this is a very tough environment, a team that is undergoing a lot of changes against an upcoming dangerous team like West Virginia. It could get interesting in Morgantown. I'll leave it at that for the time being. Everyone's circling the Colorado against North Dakota State game, and frankly, I do think Colorado's going to win. I do think Colorado's going to come away with this one, but if North Dakota State can slow this one down, if they can play a tough, hard-nosed type of game where they're going to run the ball much like Georgia Tech did against Florida State, if they can do that against Colorado, this one could get really interesting. If that Colorado offensive line is not where it needs to be as of right now, this one could get really interesting. So overall, I'm not necessarily super worried about Colorado in this spot, but at the end of the day, that is a very talented, very disciplined North Dakota State group coming in, and maybe things get a little bit interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people would love that, but at the end of the day, I do think Colorado is likely the team to pick here. Moving on, Florida State also walks into a trap, and I know that sounds crazy because the reality is they should not have any question that they are going to be able to win this game at home against Boston College, but this one's sketchy. Thomas Castellanos on the other side might even be able to pose more problems than Haynes King. He's not necessarily the passer that Haynes King is, but with his legs, he's downright special. And it's one of those things that if that defensive line is not figured out the way that it needs to be a week from today, they're going to have a nightmare on their hands, and they might have a season where it starts 0-2 on their hands. So it'll be definitely something really interesting to watch, but at the end of the day, if Florida State can't refocus, if they can't get their stuff together and make sure that they are ready for that game on Monday and win that game, and not only win it, but win it by a margin, if they don't do that, then we have a big-time problem in Tallahassee, and it's not just, this team. It's a program problem. So that's something we'll obviously unpack if that does happen. I wouldn't bet on this one either, but it's a little bit of a trap area for Florida State for sure. And then I want to talk about USC and LSU. Is this the most consequential game of week one? And this one sounds a little bit interesting because obviously it's not the biggest game. When you talk about Notre Dame A&M, when you talk about Clemson, Georgia, those are the ones that you really point to and say those are the huge games this week. But USC and LSU is an interesting one because both these teams have the ability to make noise in their conference. They have one very glaring side of the ball that needs to be fixed. That defensive side of the ball, whichever one of them fixes it quicker, is going to have the chance to make some noise. There's no doubt about that. So there's going to be a number of different ways that they're able to possibly make noise this upcoming year, and a lot of it's going to be able to be shown in week 1. And another part of this is another 1-to-1 comparison between the SEC and the Big Ten. We'll get another one in week 2 against Texas and Michigan, but at the end of the day, this is a game that's going to be brought up in college football playoff conversations, not only because it's a 1-to-1 comparison, but because LSU plays Alabama, they play Ole Miss, they play a ton of other teams that are going to have their say at the playoff, as well as them maybe having a say. USC plays Michigan, they play Penn State, they play a number of teams that are going to have their say in the playoff. So this might be one of those games that maybe neither of these teams are in the conversation for the playoff, but you got to use this game to then, draw conclusions for other matchups and for other battles between two teams from the Big Ten and the SEC. So it's going to be really interesting. This one is obviously one that we expect to see a ton of points in, and I'm right there with pretty much everyone else. It sounds like Garrett Nussmeier is suffering from a couple of turnover troubles throughout camp, so definitely something to watch there. But overall, I think we're going to hear about this one a lot throughout the season. I think we're going to hear about this one when it's talked about in conference situations and CFP situations and just how good these teams are. I think they're going to point to this one and say, that's where everything started to happen for LSU, or that's where everything started to happen for USC. So it's going to be a huge game in week 1 and 6 days here. So it'll be really interesting to watch that one unfold. Definitely one that has a lot on the table for both of those teams. But overall, I mean, we had a great week 0. We had a week 0 that going in, you only had 4 games that really caught your eye. You only had one game that really, really caught your eye. But at the end of the day, they all delivered. Georgia Tech gave us an incredible win in Ireland that really got this season off on a chaotic foot that I think it's going to stay on for quite some time. And then you got a couple of big-time comebacks from Montana State. You got a big-time comeback from SMU to save themselves. It was a really, really fun weekend, and that was just a taste. That was just a little bit of water. Now we get the entire landslide. That was just, a little pebble rolling down the hill. Now we get going for real, and week 1 starts in full effect. So we'll get into that tomorrow. Some little tidbits that we obviously need to get to, like Michigan tomorrow. But at the end of the day, we're turning the page from week 0 to week 1, and now it's full engines go. Let's get to work and let's get this season, and it's going to be incredible. I can promise you that. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.